Well, I hope you guys have been having a good day. I know I've had a lot of fun. I've been learning a lot today. In fact, I've already made a little bit of adjustments to my presentation based on some of the stuff that Josh and Chad and Gary said. So it's been a day full of learning. So hopefully I get to share with you guys a little bit about what I've been learning for developing for mobile platforms, specifically using web standards, PhoneGap. Before I dive in, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Pfeiffer. I am a developer at Float Mobile Learning. I've had quite a few years of web development experience. It's kind of where my background is in. I've not only started development, I've done development in Flash, and Objective-C, and Java, and C++. I've been all over the board, but my background and kind of my home ground is definitely web development. Definitely find a lot of So I actually went to school here at Bradley University. I'm also a proud alum, just like Chad. I majored in the interactive media department, who was helping put on this presentation today. Focused on development, had a minor in computer science. I really enjoy coding. If you are interested at all, you can follow me on various social networks. I'm MediaBound. Always tweet about things that I'm learning, whether it be in life or in code or things like that. I think you just mentioned it, but I do absolutely love coding. It was a stretch to break me away from coding long enough just to share with you what I've been learning about coding recently. But more than I love coding is just give you a little bit of a picture in my personal life is my love for my beautiful fiance, Abby Wilson. She's going to be Abby Pfeiffer. 92 days left to her wedding. So we've been together for 1,225 days. So we're in the home stretch here finally. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to talking about designing for multiple platforms with web standards. So first, let's look at the mobile landscape a little bit. So here's the thing about putting stats up about mobile usage in the US. It seems like as soon as I put them up, new numbers come out and they've all changed. So it's very possible that in the course that I've put the slide together, the numbers have already changed. So bear with me here. So we look at kind of the shared mobile subscribers. This is specifically in North America. We see iOS seems to be topping. So I think I've seen Android on top for a while. I don't know who's on top right now, but they're both very close, about 35%, Android around 30%, BlackBerry hovering around 20%. I think they're bleeding pretty badly, especially after the iOS 5 announcement earlier this week at WWDC. Windows Mobile, WebOS taking up some of the bottom there, around 7% and 3%. And Symbian, definitely a lot bigger player over across the ocean. Not so much in the US, not so very many people with Nokia. You don't see as many people with Nokia smartphones. But these are for the most part the big players. If we're thinking about targeting a user with some sort of smartphone app, these are probably the most popular platforms we'd be on. Other ones I'm sure we'd be open to, but these are the big ones, especially iOS and Android, and still BlackBerry to an extent. So let's look at what it would take to develop on each one of these platforms. In iOS, we're looking at kind of their native language. Now when I say native language, I'm talking about the language that the SDK is written in for the application. I'm talking about the language that the apps that come with the device are written in. You can get a lot of big discussion of what native language means. But for the most part, if you're developing for iOS, you're probably going to write in Objective-C. If you're developing for Android, you're going to be writing in Java. BlackBerry is also Java. It's a little bit of a different flavor of Java, J2ME. Specifically, the versions 5 and 6 of BlackBerry, of course. As Kevin pointed out, the BlackBerry playbook runs mostly on Adobe Air. Windows Mobile uses C# or the .NET built on top of that, and then WebOS uses HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, of course. So there's one thing that that we're seeing today a lot of is that how badly fragmented the mobile realm is. And so here's the problem with all these devices running in different languages is that there's a very low percentage of code reuse. And here's what I mean by code reuse. I mean the code that I can write for iPhone. If I can reuse that code, that means I can take that same code and copy it over to Android. And unfortunately, as it stands right now, it's really not the case. Objective-C and Java are two totally different beasts, and you couldn't even copy and paste hardly 5 lines of code from one to the other. You can take the logic, but you have to rewrite it. So it's expensive to build for more than one platform too, because if I write, if I have a crazy simple application that only took 1,000 lines of Objective-C, that would probably never be the case. But then I have to rewrite those 1,000 lines in Java, rewrite those 1,000 lines in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, just so I can hit more than one platform. So it's crazy expensive to be developing for more than one platform. It's just, it's not the best option out there. It's also not a great option just to build for one platform. Because if you see right here, none of these devices have, none of them have dramatic dominance over the market right now, and it's constantly changing. Like I said, like 3 months ago, BlackBerry was probably #2, but like I said, they're bleeding pretty badly. Unless they come up with something, they're going to start falling down to position 4 or 5, and maybe off my chart here. So like I mentioned, our topic that's been reoccurring today is this idea of fragmentation. How do you hit more than one device? How do you target your users? And even if they're on iOS, or even if they're on Android, then you have a whole realm of different screen sizes that you have to worry about. Well, there is one thing that all these platforms do have in common, and that's some form of web browser. Here's the good news about the web browser. The web has been taking care of issues of fragmentation for many years now. So let's take a look into some of that. Let's talk a little bit about PhoneGap. PhoneGap is a project that lets you build your applications in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and deploy them as applications on the different devices. Now, if you follow the Float blog at all, if you follow any sort of development blog at all, you've probably heard of the PhoneGap project mentioned before. It's a really great initiative. They haven't quite hit version 1 yet. I think they're still at 0.9, 0.5, 0.2, some crazy long point release right now. But like I said, it lets you build your apps in the web technology. And essentially what it does, it wraps up a native web browser on the device and executes your code as if it was a website, but it puts it inside of a Chromeless browser that makes the user feel like it's a native application. It does a lot more than that too. It also exposes native features of the device to your application. So if you, for some reason, need to access the user's contacts, you can do that. If you need to access the device's camera, the camera roll, you can do that through PhoneGap. It exposes these parts of the native device. It has its own API that it uses to expose that. And also, it doesn't support everything through through PhoneGap API, so it also provides a very solid plugin architecture that lets you build your own plugins. So if you need to write something specifically for iPhone, you can write that in Objective-C and use the PhoneGap plugin structure to then communicate that with your app. So one of the best things about PhoneGap is that right now, even though it hasn't hit a version 1 release, it supports 6 different platforms. If you go to the website and download their package, you're going to get different instructions and code bases of how to build for Android, Beta, I don't know how you say it, but that's Samsung's new operating system. And again, we don't see that too much over here in North America, at least not in the US. BlackBerry WebWorks, this is not the tablet, but the BlackBerry Torch. iOS, Symbian, and WebOS. It supports all these right now. Windows Mobile 7 is under development. The last I checked, they don't have an official release for it yet, but there's some unofficial releases that you can get for it. So, now, what's one thing really great about talking about developing for multiple platforms using web technologies is that it reintroduces this idea from web development of write once and debug everywhere. It's a lot more conducive to good development than writing multiple times. So here's what I mean by write once and debug everywhere. If you're a web developer, you've done web development or any sort of capacity, you're familiar with this workflow. Maybe you haven't used this terminology, but you're familiar with this workflow. You have your favorite browser. Maybe it's Chrome, Safari, Firefox, something like that, and you build a website in that. After you're done, then you have to go browse or test it in other browsers. You have to go to Internet Explorer, and sure enough, it's messing it up again. And you have to go to other browsers and make little tweaks to your otherwise beautiful CSS and JavaScript just to get the other browsers to behave. Well, as web developers, we can take comfort in knowing that all the devices that PhoneGap currently has support for, all 6 of those platforms, their web browser runs off of some form of the WebKit rendering engine, which is very similar to the one that's used in the desktop versions of Safari and Chrome. And because they're all building off the same base, they all render your pages about the same. They all render the HTML and CSS about the same. Now each vendor has their own sort of implementation of how the JavaScript execution time goes through and all that. But for the most part, you're going to get mostly consistent results across the platforms. You're not going to have the same issues like you did in the days of having to test your Internet Explorer 6. Those days are almost gone, thank goodness. So let's talk about some of the benefits of using web technology. I mentioned this idea before of code reuse. With using web technologies, we have a very high percentage of code reuse. Now what's some of the things that this gets us? Well, this gets us faster development time. Because we only have to develop for one platform and then we're able to port that code, not really port it, we're able to use it again on other platforms. That means we only have to write the code once and then again debug it on other platforms, take care of the little inconsistencies that exist across the different platforms. So faster development time. More than that, because we're not writing as much code, because we're not having to worry about writing all of our code in Objective-C, writing all of our code in Java, we don't have to worry about all these different bugs popping up on each platform. Maybe you're not a Java developer, maybe you're used to some other development, you don't even know how to take care of some of these bugs. But it's pretty pretty common sense. Less code generally means less bugs. It also means cheaper development. This one's pretty simple. Less time means less money. It takes a lot less time to write something HTML, CSS, and JavaScript than it does to write it in Objective-C. It would take a lot less time to take an application you built for iPhone using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then take that over to Android than it would be to take the same code that you wrote in Objective-C and somehow rewrite it in Java. So it means cheaper development. It also means it's easier to update. One of the big issues if you did decide to go the route of building a native application for every platform is that it's going to be really difficult to implement new features. Not only is it really expensive to get that first start going, but then let's say you want to release an enhancement. Well, you have 3 different code bases that you're going to have to go through and implement that enhancement. And they're all running in different forms of SDKs, different forms of totally different languages, so you have to rewrite this update every single time. Whereas if you had written it in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, I'm just going to say web technology, it's a lot less mouthful. Then when you update your base code, the other platforms benefit from that, and they all receive that update. And again, you might have to go through and take care of some of the debugging issues that may pop up. But from my own personal experience, it's usually not that big of a deal. I would much rather write that than have to rewrite it in JavaScript, or rewrite it in Java. Another big idea here is this idea of forward compatibility. The web is, in my opinion, the web is always going to be relevant. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they've been around for a really long time, and I really don't think anytime soon, over the next few months, next few years, that it's going to go away anytime soon. We can also take comfort in knowing that probably every single mobile device that comes out from now until, I don't know, until the internet totally changes, who knows when that's going to be, is going to have some sort of internet browser on it. We can pretty much assume that's going to be the case. Users are more connected now more than ever, and it's through the internet, and people walk around connected to the internet all the time. These devices are going to have the internet on it. And what's more, through this idea of forward compatibility, when you write your code, even when new devices come out, they still render HTML, CSS, and JavaScript very similarly. I mean, yes, the HTML5 and CSS3, their specs are still under review, and they're not signed off on quite yet. So you're going to have to make tweaks as those standards are being tweaked, so everyone can be happy with them. But again, it's not going to be like you have to totally rewrite your entire library of code. It's going to be tweaks as you move forward along, as you're moving forward with technology. I mean, they still have this notion of BlackBerry WebWorks, but it works totally differently. They expect their developers to now learn Flash or learn Flex and develop their applications in Adobe Air. Or you can use web technologies, which just stay the same through there and still will run. So now, I'm kind of blowing up this idea of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But yes, if it were absolutely perfect, everyone would be using it. And it's true that not everyone is using it yet, and there are some limitations, there are some drawbacks. And the main one I'm going to focus on is this idea that we're going to be limited by the device's browser engine. Some apps really need, well, let me back up there. What I mean by being limited by the device's browser engine is that you are limited to how the browser on the device is going to execute your code. You're limited to how WebKit is going to handle your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You don't get to control how WebKit is going to draw your box to the screen. It's going to draw it in the methods that it's been defined to do. You don't get to control how it handles memory. Some devices need this lower control. They need to be able to say, all right, I'm done with this section of memory. I need to be able to get rid of it so I can make use of it for this more code that's coming in. Some applications have some really complex graphics that are being drawn to the screen, and it needs to rewrite a more efficient way of drawing elements and shapes to the screen that maybe WebKit hasn't implemented yet, or maybe it doesn't implement at all, because it wouldn't make sense to do that for web technologies. And so, yes, some applications do need that lower level, but if you think about a lot of the applications you use on your device, most of them don't have more than maybe 3 or 4 views. Most of them are just a series of lists that you tap through and load up more detail. And I'll tell you right now, HTML is great for lists.